what makes plants so amazing? I know they're pretty. I know they're beautiful. I enjoy them. I feel good around them. But what makes plants amazing?
Yeah, several, like so many things. I mean, first of all, we are part of nature, right? Plants have been around long before humans were. I view plants as our elders, our teachers, and literally they are about 10 years ahead of us from a consciousness standpoint. So they know what's coming. They evolve to be able to guide us through the earth changes that are happening, through the energetic changes, through the environmental changes. And so here they are, these like amazing allies that are guiding us really in this toxic soup that we're all living in right now. But they're amazing. And Dr. Zach Bush, if you don't know who he is, highly recommend you follow him. He's one of my favorite people to learn from. And he said very similar to animals that plants know when you are coming home. When you are about 2 kilometers away from your house, the plants can sense your energy and they know that you're on the way home. So isn't that interesting? We don't even think about that, right? We think of plants as very just kind of like complacent as they kind of sit there, but they actually have a consciousness, a vibration, a frequency, and energy that interact with our own. So that's the amazing part of plants.
This is all new to me. I've always enjoyed plants, and I almost think of them as decoration. Like this
Right.
room needs a plant. That room, And so you just said something that I don't want to just quickly pass over. You said they're 10 years ahead of us in terms of consciousness.
Correct. Yes. So they are always evolving just like us, and they are sentient beings. They have this energy, this consciousness, this vibration, and they are 10 years ahead of us, according to the indigenous peoples who, are known to hold kind of the heartbeat of the earth.
Say more about the indigenous peoples. This is fascinating to me.
Yeah. So, really, it's the Hopi Indians. They hold the keys to the consciousness on the planet, to the evolution of our planet. And they are the ones who talked about when we hit, 1999, when we all thought, oh my gosh, the world was going to end. The Hopi said, no, 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 no. It's just that we are evolving and our energy is changing. And so, they kind of track those changes as we're going through them from a humanity standpoint and from an earth standpoint. And that is one of their teachings of this consciousness. And so, it's kind of funny to me. I was vegetarian for many years. I was vegan. I was raw. I did all of the things. And then I had a shaman. I know we're getting off topic here, but I just want to share this because I think it's important. I had a shaman who said, have you ever thought about that plants, in order to evolve, they're part of our evolution. So eating plants, eating animals, that's all part of the evolutionary process. And so, that was really like, wow, I never thought about that before. I always
Right.
thought it like, I don't want to be cruel and I don't want to do this. And then come to find out plants have all the same senses. Actually, they have way more senses. They have about 20 senses. We have six, if you count the super secret sixth one that's not so secret anymore.
Well, you have to share the senses. Just share them all right now. And then I'm curious, like, what are some of the senses that plants have that we don't have? And so, yes, please share the six.
Yeah. So, we've got, the ability to hear, we've got the ability to sense, we have the ability to taste, the ability to see, the ability to know, right? So all of these things, so our kinesthetic, we can feel things with our fingers. And plants, they don't have eyes, they don't have ears, and yet they are in constant communication with each other. So if you have two plants side by side and a caterpillar or some invasive bug is eating one of the plants, it literally will emit a scent to all of its surrounding plants to say, hey, I'm getting attacked here, get ready. Do what you need to do to protect yourself. So they're like this community that is always looking out for each other, always protecting each other, which to me is amazing, right? So they don't have eyes, they don't have ears, they don't have a mouth. And yet, here they are always in this constant state of communication. And if you look at the root systems of plants, right, the mycelium, and you see this with mushrooms in particular, those roots are under the ground connecting. And so that's how part of their communication.
I've heard this with aspens. I live in Colorado and we've got a lot of beautiful aspens and I did hear that they would communicate through their root system. I did not know I did not know about all these additional layers that they can sense when we're coming home, that they can,
Yeah, there's a really great book
smell gases.
that's called Plants Talk About.
Okay.
And
Gosh,
you can even go YouTube some of these. There are some little, like 30-minute segments on, what scientists have discovered with the plants.
what a great title, What Plants Talk About.
I know.
That sounds like a book I would love. Okay, so when it comes to decluttering, what can we learn from plants? What's the wisdom? What lessons do they have for us?
I mean, they have, plants do not clutter themselves, right? They, unless, nature drops seeds and they will grow around each other, next to each other, but they don't go on top of each other, right? They don't overtake each other. When I think about clutter, I think about like, oh my gosh, I've been overtaken by this clutter.
Yes.
And it's chaos, right? Even in the natural forest, there is some order that the plants work towards and work together to create. You just don't have this big mishmash of stuff. So I think we can learn a lot about the natural order of things by observing plants and even knowing there are certain plants that don't want other plants around them, like the walnut tree. I did not know this until I started studying plants about 15 years ago. And so, when I work with the walnut tincture, I take that one solo because I want to honor the characteristics of that plant. So nothing really grows close to a walnut tree. So it's fascinating, when you can sit and take the time to observe the behaviors, you can learn a lot.
You mentioned the word characteristics just now. And what came to my mind is it's the desires, right? The desires of the plant. The plant actually has a desire. The walnut tree, it wants to be on its own. Why does it like why?
Yeah, I know. That's a good question. I should go sit by the walnut tree and ask it.
Yes. Okay. You did mention the tincture just now. And so let's talk about plant stem cells, what they are, and how they differ from traditional herbal remedies and essential oils.
Yeah. So plant stem cells reside in the new growth on the plant in the springtime. So that's the only time you can really access them. And so, most of the tinctures come from trees. And again, if you look at the characteristics, you look at something like a cedar of Lebanon tree can live to 1,000 years. So think about the wisdom think about what that tree has seen and experienced over 1,000 years, right? So you're getting all that energetic principle into your body when you're working with that plant. So in this new growth phase, you have so many things happening. So you're getting the undifferentiated part of that plant. So it hasn't become a leaf, it hasn't become a flower, it hasn't become a stem. So it's like the ultimate potential of that plant that you are getting access to. So I describe it like you think about a newborn baby. Their eyes are bright, their skin is soft and subtle, they're supple. They are just like energy beings. You just see the life force in them. And that is what these plants, these plant buds hold in their realm. They hold all of this. And they do really, so many things for us, but the main ones are they're known as drainers. So they are cleaning up our organs, our cells, and our tissue.
Mm.
They are regenerators, so they will regenerate things that have broken down in the body. And then the third thing, which I think is really understated, but one of the most important, is when we get chronically ill or we enter into a dis-ease state, what
Mhm.
happens in the body is the signaling stops working. So our signaling system, so, when I went through my major health crisis 10 years ago, my immune system was not detecting that cancer cells were proliferating in my body. So it was like there was a veil. So what these do is that veil gets lifted and the signaling starts happening in the extracellular matrix. So in the, what is it called? I can't even say it now. RES system. I'll say the
Yeah.
abbreviation, the
Yes.
RES system. And so that signaling comes back online. And so now the body's communicating, it's cleaning itself up, and it's regenerating and kind of bringing things back to life. Now, what's interesting is the mechanism of action is that these plant buds contain microRNA and they contain DNA. Now, they don't alter the DNA sequencing in the body, but they alter polymorphisms. Those are those MTHFRs. Those are those COMT genes, right? Those are the gene expressions that have either turned on when they shouldn't have, or they've turned off, like something good is turned off and something not so good is turned on. And
Yeah.
so they will normalize that. They will clean that up and clean up those polymorphisms. And we have seen that through genetic testing before working with the plant stem cell and then after, and you see the genetic polymorphisms clean up in the body, which is incredible. I don't know of anything else that can actually do that from the plant kingdom.
Wow, and so many of us have those MTHFRs and so forth, and so many of us, right?
Off the charts right now. I've never seen so many people that walk into my healing center and say, I have MTHFR, I have the COMT gene,
Yeah.
I'm not methylating, I can't get toxins out of my body. And so that's where these shine.
Okay. You mentioned your own journey a moment ago with cancer. And so, in your experience, in that experience, how would you say that the body does communicate that it's holding on to clutter, whether it's chemical or emotional or spiritual? Can you
Yeah, I mean,
share more about that?
the big thing is you go through this chaotic node, if you will, right? So clutter creates chaos, whether it's inside the body or if it's around us. And when there's chaos, there's confusion, right? You get stuck in an analytical mind versus being embodied and in your heart. So you start questioning decisions you're making, you start questioning your path forward versus when you're clear and clean, your path forward is clear and clean, right? Because it's just emulating our state. And so, when I look at the journey that I had with cancer, right, it was total chaos. And I go back and I look. So that was 10 years ago in my life where my life was in total chaos. I knew I was not supposed to be in the career I was in, but I didn't see a way out, right? I felt trapped and stuck. And I had chaos all around me. So my outside world is really just a reflection of my inner world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was so true on my journey and I see it with the clients that I work with.
Maybe it's not cancer, but it's autoimmune or it's there are just so many different manifestations, right, of that internal chaos and clutter. We have a similar story. I was in a corporate role position for a long time, for a couple decades, and I just knew it wasn't right and it felt heavy and then, what happened? Well, I had the autoimmune conditions one after another and it's the body will let us know that something
Yes.
it's got some clutter going on, right?
Absolutely. And part of what's really important is to know that and pay attention. So it's so easy. Many of us grew up in an era where, we got these messages, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. No pain, no gain, like you just power through. And
Yeah.
so we're really not taught to listen to our body. We're not taught, to have an uncluttered environment, So it's really interesting how, I think our generation that, grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like we got these messages. And so for our children, it's so important to teach them these things. Like, no, your body's giving you a message. Your environment is showing you something, that something's
Mhm.
out of alignment, out of integrity with you. And so paying attention is like one of the most important pieces, I think, of the healing journey, regardless of how you're going through it.
So, share a little bit more about your healing journey. You realize that there's a lot of chaos swirling around you internally and externally. And then what?
And then I had the opportunity to be still and to listen, and that was the game changer. But, all of a sudden, the options I was being presented with in the allopathic world, like I could feel the angst in my body, and I could literally hear my body saying, no, 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 no. And it was a weird sensation for me because I had never paid attention before. When I got sick, my lymph nodes were the size of golf balls. I had them down both sides. And people around me were like, oh my gosh, you need to go see a doctor. And I'm like, I'm fine, and I just kept powering through. And so, after the chaos and the dust settled, I was able to just sit with me. And that was new too, because I was so busy, never just took the time to be still and to listen. And my body started guiding me. And I started getting messages around me from nature, especially. It was hummingbird came and visited me and, would get these signs. I would see like 333 and 444, and I would see these angel numbers all the time. It was a weird world for me at a period of time. It took me about a year to kind of, what I call sitting in the dirty diaper of discomfort and not knowing and, just working on letting go of the fear. Cause I think clutter sometimes becomes so comfortable that it is the letting go of the fear and sitting in the unknown and saying, if I'm willing to let this go, what if I'm willing to step out of the comfort and be guided into something that's going to be more integrous to me, be more fulfilling for me, be more life giving to me? And that's what I did. And then, my whole world changed after that. From that point on, really, I would say from 10 years ago, I feel I've been divinely led and guided on every step of my journey. And I know when I don't listen, I kind of get a little two by four. If I'm powering through or if I'm sitting in a mess and I've got that chaos going on, my body tells me right away. And I'm like, okay, yep, got it.
So you
Yes.
started listening, and your path, you
Yeah,
took the path.
I went from banker to healer, from corporate. I look back and I always did business process transformation the last 15 years of my career. And I moved from business process transformation in business into personal transformation. And I had the opportunity to transform myself first so I could lead by example. And, it was the best thing. I know people say, oh my gosh, why did I get cancer? Poor me. And I had little teeny bouts of that. But when I look back, it was the best thing that happened to me because it radically changed my life. It aligned me to my purpose. I help people now. I can help people through this process because I've been through it. And I just happen to be, so connected to the plants that I utilize the plants as part of that process.
Right? It's you're integrated with them, right? You're woven together. So, you founded your company, Nature Provides.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I say these plants found me. So for some reason in 2018, my markers were going up. So it was 3 years after my initial big health crisis. And it didn't make any sense to me because I felt like my life was in pretty good balance. And so I was really shocked and I was really disappointed. And I get this phone call from a friend, and she invited me to go visit her and her husband in Dallas. And she said, my husband works with a lot of, former cancer patients, and you might be on the way to a recurrence. And at that point, I had stepped away from corporate. I actually had started an essential oil company called Ancient Plant Wisdom because I had been studying with those plants for a long time. And I just love them. And it was really hard to find organic ones. And so, I kind of did it as a hobby and because it was feeding my soul. But I really didn't have a big purpose. And so I flew to Dallas, and my friend's husband comes out with this bottle. And this is all in the documentary. And he said, this has saved a lot of my patients' lives. And I was like, okay, great. What is it? And as soon as he said embryonic plant stem cells, I felt like it shook my whole world. Like I looked at him and I said, what are they? How do they work? Why do they work? I need to know everything. And he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was just sharing something with you. And I said, okay, I need to know. And so 3 months later, I ended up getting myself invited because it was for doctors. I'm not a doctor into this training class. And it was really fascinating because I'm an experiential learner. I think you are too. And there were no plant stem cells there. It was all head. It was all doctors. And I realized, wow, I know more about the plants than anybody in this room because of my study with essential oils. And I'll talk about what's different in a minute. And so I consumed everything I could. And on the last day, this man who was teaching the class said, oh, I'm going to be selling my company. And here comes that same like, my gosh, it's supposed to be me. I knew it. And I'm like, doesn't make any sense. Like I was in my head, I was like, what? This doesn't make any sense to me. So I literally called my husband from the airport in Honolulu and I said, I think we're going to be buying a plant stem cell company. And so, I sat with it for 2 months. Then I called this man up and I said, would you be willing to put me on some plants? And 2 months later, my markers were back in the normal range. And I realized, oh, and the message that I received, Heather, was you are the steward of these plants. And one of the things I learned from the indigenous grandmothers is, land and nature really doesn't want to be owned. We as humans, we say, oh, I own this property, I own this company, I own this. And the plants were really clear like, no, you don't own us. We are choosing you to be the steward to get these out at a time where the toxicity is just going to get worse and worse. And that was back in 19 when I got that message. And so it's really clear that, okay, I'm here to work for them and to bring them out. And that's what I did. Even the name of the company Nature Provides was totally divinely guided.
I would love to hear that story.
Okay. So, when I ended up getting the company to be the steward, I flew to Italy because that's where all these beautiful plants grow that we work with in the Italian Alps, not sprayed by anything, no heavy metals, super clean. And I really, I'm a trust but verify kind of person. And I was like, okay, I have to see if this is real. And so I flew to Italy, and as soon as I saw Vito, yes, he's Italian and his name is Vito, and he's not in the mafia, but he is just, we saw each other and I'm like, wow, I have known you forever. And he's like, me too. So we just had this beautiful, beautiful heart connection. And, I went and I saw every aspect and everything was intentional. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so I said, but the name of this PSC distribution makes no sense to me. And it's stale and it doesn't have any energy and I've got to change, I've got to come up with a new name. So we sat down and we were brainstorming in our heads and nothing was flowing, nothing. And so finally we walked out and it starts to rain and he went to get a magazine. It was a National Geographic and he put it under his arm and I looked at him. I said, turn that around. And I actually have a picture of the magazine. It said, Nature provides everything you need. And I looked at Vito and I said, that's the name. And he said, oh my gosh, that's the name. So that's how it happened. So everything really in the last 10 years from this really scary, challenging, dis-ease that I had in my body has led me to where I am today. And that's why to me, I find it incredible that I've had the opportunity to heal and to work with these beautiful remedies.
How do you feel today?
Amazing. Yeah, it struck me because I was working with a client who came in and we're 7 years apart biologically. Okay, so on paper, she's 7 years older than me. And I'm going to be 60 in a few months, and I feel like I'm 30. And, I think how we look and how we feel is a reflection of what's going on in our world, right? And this woman said, I feel like I'm 100. And I left that appointment and I'm thinking, wow, 7 years biologically, but 70 years in how our bodies feel, how we feel in our skin, how we feel in our lives. And that really, really struck me. So, I have never got COVID. I don't get sick. And I know that these plants are a big piece of that because
Mhm.
I was very toxic. And when I go back and look at pictures of me, a year after my healing crisis, and then 3 years after my healing crisis, I don't look like that person anymore. As a matter of fact, when I see those pictures, I'm like, I don't remember looking like that or feeling like that.
I can attest to those pictures, I've seen them, and no, it's 2 different people is the way it looks to me, just a
Yeah.
very dramatic difference, and so I'm so glad that you feel amazing today and that you're on this mission. Let's get back, so plant stem cells, is this something that's available to everybody?
Yes, they are. And I even have had herbalists say, well, can't I make my own? Sure you can. Right? So those plant buds, you've got to pick them at the right time. And this is all part of that intentionality. But in Italy, part of our process is we have botanists who go and check the trees because trees open at different times. And you have to get these when they're still in the bud, they're still closed. If they start to open up, you literally start to lose some of the active principles. And so they are checking, okay, is silver fir ready? Or is silver birch ready? Is hawthorn ready? And so they are checking these, and then at just the right time, they pick them. And within 2 hours of picking that bud, it will start to open up. So you have to then macerate it. And there are really only two ways to pull active principles out of the plant buds, and that's either some type of alcohol and some type of vinegar. And so we use organic grape alcohol. Obviously, that's plentiful in Italy where the plants grow. And then we add organic glycerin to stabilize it. So it's a combination of those 2, and then the active principles from the plant. So, as somebody who, back in 2015, I was taking 120 supplements a day.
My
Okay.
God.
I was taking 40 pills at breakfast, 40 pills at lunch, and 40 at dinner. And, I wasn't digesting the capsules. And I was taking great things. I was taking turmeric and CoQ10 and NAC and all of these amazing things. But I was so toxic, my body couldn't take anything in. And so, that's one of the big learnings is if you don't have a drainage remedy, if you're not clearing out the toxic load, it's almost like there's no space for anything else to come into.
Mhm.
So you've got to address the toxic burden. You've got to improve the immune system.
Mhm.
And then I think the third piece of most dis-ease is trauma. And it doesn't have to be a big trauma. Even little traumas will add up and the body will hold on. And you see that in the right in your life is trauma is what causes us to hold on to things. So it could be an emotional trauma, it could be a memory of something, but that's why we hold on to things. And the
Right,
body
right,
does the same thing.
right. That the clutter is a symptom and it always relates back to something that has happened in the past and the story around it. So with I have this is your allergy support, which I love and I took all summer long. And so is this something just to explain how somebody, if they had the plants themselves, how they would go about and use it?
Yeah, there are 2 ways. So every one of them is liquid. One of the things that I didn't mention that I think is important to mention is that the plant buds have cellular water that mirrors the cellular water in our body. So
Say more
Dr.
about that. What
Yeah,
yeah,
so
what does that
so
mean?
our scientific director, Dr. Canilla, found this by accident. He was walking by with the water from the plant buds because in order to know how much alcohol and glycerin to add, you've got to know how much water is in the bud because they're different, right? Rosemary will have something different than like silver birch. And so he had this test tube of the water and he had another test tube of regular distilled water. And the test tube with the bud water lit up like this fluorescent, like kind of like my dress, fluorescent blue. He has a great picture of it. And he said, "What the heck is that?" So he put it under a microscope. And what he saw were these little dodecahedron shapes that look like soccer balls. And he started studying it and he said, "Oh my gosh, this is cellular water. This is structured water, just like we have structured water in our bodies. That's why it's good for us to drink structured water because it's mirroring what's inside of us." And so he was able to see that under the microscope. And then he also saw these little nanodots that he called carbon nanodots of light. And so, when I ended up starting this company, Nature Provides, I kept seeing light come into the body and I didn't understand it. Well, he found that at the same time he found the cellular water. And he said, "Wow, it's bringing these like almost like sparks of light into the body." And you imagine what that does. It just starts turning things on, right? Things start working differently and kind of going back to a state of homeostasis and balance.
Mm, wow. So much
But
different.
yes, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your questions. You take these orally, but I do have people that use them topically. We have some plants have an affinity for organs and systems in the body. So you're working with allergy support, right? For
Uh-huh.
allergies.
Mhm.
We've had amazing results with that product. So over time, if you keep taking it, it'll be like an allergy shot without the shot, and you will start to overcome what you are allergic to. So it's incredible. And you take them orally or topically, mostly orally. And you can either put them straight in your mouth on your tongue, or you can put them in a little water if you don't like the taste. Most of them are, pretty okay. Some of them taste really good. There are a few that taste not so good. And then the rest are kind of in the middle. But you
You
just
know
take them a couple times a day
yeah.
because they have a half life of 5.5 hours. So I usually tell people at least twice a day to keep it in your system steady. So it'll start doing its magic.
I love the allergy support, and I will just say, I do it orally, I put it on my tongue, and it actually creates a lot of like, it just feels alive. It feels like I'm putting something alive into my body that creates a lot of warmth, and it's like a little happy buzz is
Yes.
how it actually feels when I put it in my body.
Yeah, and that's that light. What you're feeling is that light that's coming into your body. We all need more light, right?
Yes, we do. That's what I was just thinking. Gosh, right? Like light is so healing. It's so healing. I want to hear I want to hear about your documentary.
Okay. So we release, well, two things. I wrote a book called Ancient Plant Wisdom that really guides people that are new to this modality. It shares a little bit about my healing journey, but what are they? Why do they work? How do they work? And then I have a mini Materia Medica, which is an encyclopedia of the plants and what they do. And I also list the energetic properties because we forget that we're energetic beings and it's important to know that. And then I filmed a documentary because as a steward of these plants, they're not well known in the US. In Europe, they're more well known. But here in the US, they're not well known. And as my mission to get them out there, I wanted to bring people to Italy. So most of the film was done in Italy, and you get to meet some of the key players. You see Vito in there, you see Dr. Camillo in there, and then we have some practitioners who are sharing their experiences. And then the rest of it was filmed on my property here, so where I live. And we wanted to bring nature into it. And we have two more episodes coming. The second one should be out in a month, and it is really about the consciousness of the plants. And so it's me and Dr. Canillo. I actually flew out to Italy to get this and really understand. He's a Gemini, which if you don't know Geminis, he holds the spiritual and the physical science all together, and he can explain it beautifully. And so he's really going to be talking about this consciousness. And then the third episode will be focused on how practitioners are applying it in their practices and some of the results that they've seen with their clients.
Do people need to go through a practitioner to access the plant stem cells or can they come to you?
Yeah, we have two lines. So we have Nature Provides, which is our practitioner line. And in there, they can sign up under me if they're interested in ordering. But we also have plantstemcells.com. So we started that last year because we wanted to make it more readily available for people. And that has more limited SKUs. So Nature Provides has like 300 SKUs. So it's a little overwhelming. If you have never been on the site, you'd be like, oh my gosh, where do I go? Plantstemcells.com. And that's the bottle that you have. I think we have 12 SKUs. We're going to add a few more, but it's just much easier to navigate for people, and anybody can go on there and check it out. And there's some information on what they are. And
Okay. So at School of Living Lighter, we often talk about the lighter path. And this can mean whatever you want it to mean, the lighter path. And so for you, Jen, thinking about your experience, thinking about the highs and the lows, where you are today, what does the lighter path look like for you?
for me, it is reconnecting to that little girl that got lost along my journey. So, up until I went to college, I was an outdoor girl. I was in the grass looking up at the stars. I would make shapes of the clouds in the skies. I was climbing trees. I was in nature. And somehow I found myself when I went to college sitting inside, and especially my 29-year career in corporate, sitting at a desk with a computer. It was one of the first generations to have computers at their desks, believe it or not, and sitting under fluorescent lights and totally disconnected from nature. And I believe that that disconnect was the beginning of my health crisis because I was not me. I was living appropriately, not living authentically. And so the path of living lighter for me is coming back into my authenticity or stepping forward into my authenticity and really having joy and fun and play, because as a corporate girl, that wasn't part of my world. Everything was serious, everything was regimented and rigid and constructed and scheduled. And now to be able to get up, I was laughing. Yesterday was a pretty busy day for me, and I went outside at the end of my day and I just started like weird dancing like Elaine on Seinfeld and shaking the energy off and barefoot, and I was doing cartwheels, and I came inside and my husband said, "Oh my God, you were so cute." And I went, "Oh crap, you were watching me?" No, there's nobody, right? Dance when nobody's watching. And that's what I get to do now. I have the tools now where, you know, if and when I do have those days, and I do have them occasionally, that I can honor myself, honor nature. I can play. And my dear friend Helen, she's so good at that. Like, why are you being so serious? Let's go do a funny video. And so, to surround myself with people that remind me as well is like that's my light path.
Oh, I think we all take ourselves so seriously, way too seriously. And so I think surrounding yourself with others that can help you lighten up, being in nature and just being inspired, right, by nature. And maybe you end up doing cartwheels, like you said, or dancing. And
Yeah, and our beloved JJ made the comment. She said, "You don't get creative sitting behind a desk.
so
Your
true.
creativity and your life force is when you're out and you see something and it inspires you and then information can come in because you're clear. You're not cluttered."
That so I spent 6 weeks in a wheelchair because of a broken hip. And every evening, I worked all day long in front of a computer. And every evening I would say to a family member, so either one of my kids or my husband, who's going to take mom for a walk? Who's going to push mom? I couldn't push the wheelchair because I also had a broken wrist and a cast. And so I would beg, but I was going outside one way or another. And someone would always take me. But the minute we got outside, I would feel better. It would just completely change any anxiety that I had, any frustration, any kind of unease. The minute I got outside, I can breathe, I can think, I can appreciate.
Right.
And, sitting at like the wheelchair height, it actually was a very different perspective. We have a local park that we can walk to, and enjoying it from the wheelchair, I saw things so differently, but the sky was so immense and all of the plants and, they
It's much
really,
easier to shift into gratitude, right?
yes.
When you're out in this expansive world that we live in.
Yes. Yes, and that's I felt that gratitude, and it just made it so much easier to remain neutral about the broken hip and the broken wrist and know that it was temporary. And so, yeah, and now I'm thinking, gosh, the park is less than 2 miles away. That park, they knew we were coming, right? The plants are like, "Let's get ready for Heather."
Come on, Heather.
And one of our family members, usually it was my youngest son who would take me. Actually, you know what? I think nature also evokes kindness and compassion. My younger son would push me around more often than anybody else. And he would just chit chat, about his day or about anything. And he wouldn't consciously realize this, but on each walk with him, I would get about 5 kisses on the top of my head. And I feel like he's never done that indoors. Never. But for some reason, being outside, pushing me in that wheelchair, he was fully present in whatever he was sharing and experiencing. It just evoked that extra kindness.
Yes, yes,
All right. So your book is Ancient Plant Wisdom.
yes.
Your documentary, by the way, you didn't mention this, so I'm going to, has won numerous awards.
Yes.
Numerous awards. Congratulations. And these aren't just little awards. I want to pronounce it right. It's like the Cannes Awards, right?
Yeah, Cannes Film Festival. We
And
won
oh,
Best Health Film, Best iPhone Feature Film, and Best Artistic Filmmaking, and we are in the running for, like, 6 others we've been nominated for, so we're waiting to hear back on those.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that documentary is called Nature Provides: The Ancient Wisdom of Plant Stem Cells.
oh my goodness. And then you mentioned that some of the documentary is filmed at your home. And so you have a location, a retail location or a location. Where is that?
Yeah, I'm in North Carolina, and I live on 12.5 acres, so this was all part of the magic that unfolded in my life after my health crisis. So we were guided to move during COVID in 2020. And I literally came home and there was a postcard in my mailbox of somebody wanting to buy my old house. And so, like, boom, 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 everything happened. And I got really clear. And I think you talk about visioning. I got clear on what I wanted. I wanted a space with water, with nature, a place to run my business, a place to do my healing, a place for my mother in law to live with us that wasn't in our space. And this place has all of that. So
Yeah.
everything just kind of came in. And I think you've got to be clear and uncluttered for manifest your desires. And so that was a great example of like, wow, how amazing, how grateful. I am.
I love your intention and your attention. And so you manifested that and you created a healing home, a healing property. And we all can do that. We all have that ability and that potential, regardless of how heavy life feels or what kind of chronic health conditions we have. You've been a great inspiration to slow down, to listen, to tune in, and to ask yourself what really feels right and light. Where can we find you on social?
So I'm at Nature Provides Us on Facebook and Instagram, and LinkedIn is Nature Provides, and Jen Payeur. So it's JenPayeur is my handle for Instagram.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Heather. You're such a bright light. I love what you're doing, and I love to be able to be with you, learning from you as well. So thank you.
Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, give us a like and share with friends who could use some lightness. Don't forget to follow our page for daily doses of living lighter. And remember, if it feels light, it's right.